healing isn't about going back to a time before the trauma. That life is over, right? We can't go back and change the things that have happened in our personal lives or in our collective lives as Americans. The slate is not wiped clean, but you get to decide what is written on it next. And um that was really important for me to recognize. I really think American history, studying American history in earnest, is a therapy session for our nation. And folks, we have got some work to do. Once upon a time, I was a therapy skeptic. Now, before you roll your eyes, whether you're a therapy skeptic as well, who thinks that sitting on the couch talking to someone solves nothing, or maybe you're a therapy enthusiast and you swear by it. To me, I just thought, it was a bunch of mumbo jumbo, a waste of time. Like, how can me telling somebody something change anything? But at one point, I found myself facing a traumatic experience that was like impossible for me to sidestep. And it was so traumatic that I didn't realize the long lasting effects from it. And so after, I don't know, maybe it was like 5 years or something, um, of just kind of playing whack-a-mole where like issues would come up and I'd like do this and another thing over here and here and just constantly like living my life in that state, I decided to reluctantly step into therapy. And so what I thought was a sign of personal failure at that point ended up being a catalyst for a healing journey that I didn't think could happen to me. So why am I talking about this personal journey? Well, because it's strikingly similar to how we as a nation often approach American history. I really think American history, studying American history in earnest, is a therapy session for our nation. And folks, we have got some work to do. And just like any therapy session, it's going to get uncomfortable. But in the safe space of a therapy room, and I know that phrase safe space, sometimes people hear it and they roll their eyes, but truly, like in the truest sense of the term, in the safe space of a therapy room, you can confront your vulnerabilities, your past traumas, all the messy intricacies of who we are. A lot of that baggage, we didn't even know was there until we start opening these suitcases up and unpacking them and laying out what we've been carrying along with us for so long. And as kids, we form beliefs about the world, whether the world is safe or not. And we form beliefs about ourselves and whether we're worthy or not, and about other people, whether they can be trusted. And these core beliefs can set the stage for how we relate to everything around us, how we relate to ourselves. And so if we only focus on the present without examining the imprint of the past, we deny ourselves the opportunity to truly grow. I think the same principle applies to our national identity. In America, we have this sort of move on and move out mentality. We like to think we can start fresh, unburdened by our past, and just say, like, from now on, we're starting fresh. But that's not how it works. It's not how individuals work. That's not how people work. So why would a nation made up of people behave any differently? Our nation's past is its childhood, and we're still carrying around a lot of old beliefs, defense mechanisms, maybe traumas. Think of America now as the young adult that she is, and compared to, the Roman Empire and things like that. Like, we're a very young adult, and we're entering a new phase of awareness of who we are. And just like someone in their 20s maybe starts to take time to reflect on their experiences, their upbringings, what their family dynamic may have been, I think we as a nation are at a similar threshold. And I think it's time for us to reassess some of the inherited beliefs and patterns that we grew up with as a nation, and we need to decide which ones serve us and which ones don't. And that's how growth happens. That's how healing begins. How many times have you heard people saying, our nation needs to heal? Our nation is broken. Things are broken. Think about it. In a group therapy session, the aim isn't to say, well, that happened. Let's forget about it and move on. In therapy, you dive into your personal history, right? Like, that's basically how you start. I had no idea what was going to happen when we went in. I thought I was going to be like laying on a couch. I actually ended up doing it over Zoom, so didn't have that romantic therapy feeling. But you untangle the web of your past to understand who you are today. Well, the same applies to our American identity. Our national identity is like a child who's been raised by many parents. And we're talking when I'm talking parents, what I'm talking about are these spheres of influence over our life as a nation. And we've had many, and they've been very disparate voices. And we've inherited their mistakes, their unresolved issues, yeah, their traumas. I'm not trying to be a millennial complaining about trauma because my local Starbucks didn't celebrate my personal holiday the way that I wanted them to. But think about it, folks. When your family has a complicated history, you inherit not only their assets, but their debts. And whether we like it or not, the past has a funny way of showing up uninvited into the present. It's like this generational inheritance of wisdom and wounds. So we may love to celebrate the 4th of July, though some don't, or celebrate the achievements of the civil rights movement or the ingenuity of American enterprise. These are the family heirlooms that we might display proudly in the living room. But what about the dust covered boxes in the attic or the things that we've shoved under our bed? Ignoring them won't make them vanish. And just like in therapy, you have to address the whole picture, not just the parts you're proud of, because only when we face these uncomfortable truths can we begin to heal as individuals and then collectively as a nation. Now you're probably wondering, what do we do with all this baggage? I asked my I asked my therapist the same thing. Great question. We acknowledge it. We acknowledge that it's there. Acknowledging that messy part is the first step toward meaningful growth and healing. You can't solve a problem if you can't admit one is there, right? And here's another thing. In therapy, I've learned the goal is not to blame, but to understand the root cause of issues so you can tackle what you have power over. I realized I can't control other people. I can't control how they behave or how they respond to me, how I wish they would respond to me. I wish they did this. I wish they did that. I hate how they said that. I hate how they made me feel. It's the same when we're looking at our nation. We can't control what other people do, but we can look and say, what do I have power over to change? And I don't think for a moment that understanding is just this intellectual exercise. And we know it's not intellectual because I'm sure you've seen people, on these news programs where people are like freaking out at each other. They're screaming and they're yelling over the table. And this is not just an intellectual exercise. And I think we have to acknowledge the emotional weight of our history. And it doesn't impact all of us the same, just as if you have a family with a lot of kids. When those kids grow up, not everybody's going to look back and say we all had the same experience. People are going to have different experiences, even if they were raised in the same family. But it's important to acknowledge those different experiences that each of us have had. But here's where it gets empowering, because when we understand the origin of our problems, not just as an individual, but as a community, we can begin the work of transformation. The slate is not wiped clean, but you get to decide what is written on it next. And um, that was really important for me to recognize, because I think, when I was first going to therapy, I was upset. I didn't want to go because I recognized that it wasn't going to change the terrible thing that had happened. That was written in stone. It wasn't going anywhere. And it wasn't going to change the way I felt about it either. And it didn't. But it helped me to recognize that, I have agency. I can choose what happens tomorrow to the best of my ability. And so, what I want you to take away from this is that we have agency. We're not bound by the actions or inactions of those who came before us, the way I think that some of us feel. There is hope for redemption. There's hope for changing the narrative. In therapy, you don't get to wave a magic wand and erase the past. No amount of talking, analyzing, or crying is going to erase some of those bad things that happen. But that's not the point. And similarly, when we dig into American history here on this channel, I'm not trying to rewrite the history books or whitewash events or pretend things were one way when they were really another. We can't undo the Trail of Tears. We can't erase our legacy of slavery or pretend that, things were always amazing. What we can do is confront these uncomfortable and even painful parts of our American family story and recognize how they've shaped the national psyche. Healing isn't about going back to a time before the trauma. That life is over. Right? We can't go back and change the things that have happened in our personal lives or in our collective lives as Americans. And whether we like it or not, the past has a funny way of showing up uninvited into the present.